Hello and welcome to this course on converting Blueprint to C++. We are going to be tackling the thorny question of whether you should be using Blueprint or C++ for a given problem. I'm also going to be introducing myself, your instructor. My name is Sam, and I have the wonderful good fortune of working with a group of instructors called Game Dev TV. We make online courses and you should check them out. They're very good. So you could follow us on Twitter as well, or myself, Sam Patuzzi, are the Twitter handles if you are thus inclined. Now, you're going to be learning how you can write C++ specifically for Unreal Engine. There are a bunch of different helper macros and preprocessor stuff that can help you write C++ for Unreal Engine. And we're going to be learning how we can convert Blueprints, the integrated graphical scripting language, to C++. And we're going to learn how you can integrate and use the two together, which is obviously the most powerful way of using Unreal Engine. Now, this is not a beginner course. I do expect you to understand a few things. For example, I do expect you to understand C++. This is not a C++ primer. I'd expect you to have written some C++ before, but not necessarily in Unreal Engine. So that means that you should understand what a class is, what a pointer, a reference, and inheritance means. All these terms I would expect you to understand. I'd also expect you to know your way around the engine. Particularly, I'd like you to know what the viewport is, what it's there for, how you can get around it, the world outliner, your details panes, and the content browser. These things should be fairly bread and butter for you. And I'd also like you to be familiar with creating blueprints. So the idea and concepts of blueprints are not new to you. Particularly, I'd like you to have created a blueprint with components and variables before, so you understand both of these concepts. Finally, I would have expected you to have programmed some basic functionality in a blueprint graph. So you're familiar with these blueprint graphs and how they work and how they act like programs. And probably you've seen some of the similarities with programming in C++ if you have done this. Now, if any of this is unfamiliar to you, there are a bunch of courses on the learning platform that I would recommend. For example, your first hour with Unreal is a really good primer to getting you used to the engine, introducing Unreal Engine, and Blueprint's essential concepts. That last one is particularly good for getting you to grips and having you program in Blueprints for the first time. And obviously for C++, there's lots of reading out there. So if you need the groundings in C++, I recommend you go and take a course on that. So let's have a look at some of the strengths of writing code in Blueprint. And inherently, these strengths of Blueprint are weaknesses of C++ as well. So Blueprint is very quick to compile, unlike C++ that can take at least 15 seconds if you have made a header file change. It's quick to iterate, therefore, so you can make a quick change in Blueprint, hit play, and within seconds you are seeing the results in your level. It's easy to understand because it's a visual scripting language. C++ can be quite dense, and being quite an old language, has lots of idiosyncrasies and can be hard for the beginner and even the advanced programmer to understand. Blueprint has none of that baggage. It is very easy to understand. It also makes discovering the API in Unreal Engine super easy because of the context-sensitive right-click. If you've programmed in the Blueprint graph, you know what I mean. When you right-click anywhere with a certain context selected, it gives you the relevant functions available to you. And that's super cool, and we don't really have an equivalent in C++, even with things like IntelliSense. And finally, it is designer and artist friendly, meaning that people who haven't programmed before can open up a Blueprint graph and kind of quite quickly get an idea of what's going on. Whereas with coding, they typically get tripped up by things like the syntax, and so get scared away before they even begin. So if you want your designers and artists to be poking around your code, then Blueprints are great. So let's talk about the strengths of C++ on the flip side, and these are also going to be weaknesses to Blueprint. So performance. C++, you can't beat it on performance. It's running on the bare metal. It's super, super quick, and Blueprint has to run in a virtual machine, which means that it is going to be slightly slower no matter what you do. However, that said, it may not be the bottleneck in your particular game. So do make sure you are profiling and don't just use C++ because you're saying, I want it to be super performant. C++ can do anything. It's super, super powerful, and it has access to the whole of the engine API. There's nothing that you can't do in the engine with C++. Blueprints, however, does not have access to the entirety of the engine API, so some things require C++. It also works extremely well with version control because it is just text files, and version control was built to manage text files. On the other hand, blueprints are binary assets and are much harder to diff and pretty much impossible to merge. C++ is also super concise. What can take a page worth of blueprint to represent can often be a one-liner in C++ and be similarly readable. Which brings me on to the next point, which is maintainability at scale. Maintaining C++ is a very known entity, and people have been doing it for years at scale in big companies with massive products. Look at Microsoft, for example, and Unreal Engine. All of this means that C++ has got lots of tools for keeping your code maintainable. Blueprint has a lot of tools as well, but I would have to say that C++ certainly has the edge on this one.